Good afternoon. It is 4 o'clock and this is the Jefferson PUD's regular board meeting and it is February 20th, 2024. I'm Jeff Randall, president of the board, calling this meeting to order. Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings. Unless advance notice is provided, online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. And if you are calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand or to request to speak. And let's do a roll call again. Jeff Randall, president of the board, District 1.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
You're all present and accounted for. We have an agenda, and I think we have a couple things to add. One, let's see, I'm going to go down to new business. One is we had an ICG meeting last Thursday, and there was a discussion of an appointee to the Growth Management Steering Committee. Were you planning to address that someplace else?
I was gonna do it in manager's report because it doesn't take a vote. You guys just choose, but if you want to put it to new business, we can.
Okay, well, we can do that in the manager's report. And then we have an issue with your salary that we need to address. So I propose that we add that at the end of the agenda as 9.2 general manager's salary cost of living increase. Is that acceptable? The other members?
So
Yeah.
I move we accept the agenda as amended.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, are there any other changes? Seeing none, all in favor of the modified agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye, we have an approved agenda. So the first item on the agenda is public comment. And this is public comment allows members of the public to comment limited to 3 minutes each on any items not specifically listed on the agenda or for items listed on the consent agenda. Prior to any public comment, members of the public must first be recognized by the president or by the president and are not permitted to disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct and fair progress of the commission's meeting. After initial warning by the president or the designated chair of the meeting, individuals who intentionally violate these guidelines through actual disruption of the commission meeting will be dropped from the meeting. Do we have anybody that would like to make a comment on the agenda? And Dawn, you have your hand up. Is that an accident or intentional?
Intentional. So last week we had a snowstorm, a very heavy, wet snow throughout the entire county. They brought limbs and trees down and causing outages throughout the entire service territory. I thought our folks did an excellent job in responding. They got up at a little dark 30, worked straight through the day into the evening at 2 o'clock to get everybody back in. I have to tell you, I worked with a lot of operating teams over the years, and we're very lucky to have these guys on board.
Thanks, Dawn, for recognizing that. And then we've got a hand up for the 246 number and phone number on the line. Is that Roger, or who do we have? Phone number ending in 246.
Roger, I think you're
*9.
muted.
Is it *9? What's he got to?
*6.
*9 to raise your hand.
*6 to mute. There we go. You're unmuted now. Please proceed.
Thank you. Subsequent to my question 2 weeks ago about the fall in our tier number from, I don't know, it was something 10 something in June, and it's 4.5 in December. That's a pretty big jump, and the answer I got is kind of raised more questions than it answered. Could I get a little who, why, what, where about that? Was there a write down involved in there? What kind of numbers did we move, and why are we doing this? Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any other follow-ups, or is that your whole comment and question, Roger?
No, that's my whole comment and question. I just, it seems like that you'd have to burn half the plant down to do that. Those are pretty big numbers at the end of a rolling 12-month period. And also it happened at a time when our tier numbers go up instead of down. And so we were high when we should have been low. something's changed there. And then we were low when we should have been high. And I'd like some more explanations if I could. Thanks.
Okay. Mike, are you prepared to respond to that at all? The tier numbers that were in the financial report last week? And
Give me until the manager's report and then I can maybe comment a little bit on it.
okay, so Roger, if you can hang around till the manager and staff reports, we'll
problem.
try to address it then. Okay.
Thank you.
Did we have anybody else who wanted to comment on things not on the agenda or on consent? Yes, sir.
Bill Stover, Port Townsend. I'm interested in knowing if the Hastings substation short-term activities are on track, the three-phase extension and the regulator replacement for the summer and fall. And also interested in more detail on the long-range plans and the financial impacts that they carry with them, and in particular, the second transformer for the Hastings substation and feeder lights.
Okay. And I'm
All of that would be really awesome to see on a webpage on the PUD website at some point.
okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. And I'm presuming, Kevin, you can respond to that. Give us an update on those things in the manager's report too. Okay. Okay. Anybody else for things not on the agenda or on consent agenda? And Roger, your hand's still up. Did you forget something?
Nope. I'll put
Okay.
it down.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Seeing no more public comments, we are now to managers and staff reports. So as you go through that, please maybe talk a little bit about where we're at with kind of storm related improvements that we identified that are short term. Maybe talk a little bit about how the long-term plans fit into, like if it's our 4-year capital plan or where that is, how we show that work. And then Mike, if you could talk a little bit about the tier changes that we saw in last week's or last time's financial report. Take it away, Kevin.
I'm gonna start out by asking the line crew, or at least those that are here, to stand up, please. We'll throw Josh in there too. You know, you guys were just coming in when Don talked about, you know, the outages, this last snowstorm, the cold snap, those kind of things. So from staff, from the board, we want to thank you guys for what you're doing for us in the community. It really shows that you're out there doing the work under the worst conditions, and we just want to thank you and appreciate everything you do, so. Next on my report is the GMA Growth Management Steering Committee. From staff, we went a different way. We were gonna have Gene attend those meetings. Not sure why Josh, you know, said, Jeff, that you were gonna be our representative, because that was not conveyed to the county from us. I think it was just an assumption on his part. I know it kind of caused a little discussion there at the meeting. So I understand now that the commission does want a commissioner on that. I do have to let them know, probably won't do it tonight, but tomorrow morning, as soon as possible, who is going to represent the PUD on the Growth Management Steering Committee. So if you guys could let us know who is going to be our representative, that would help.
Okay, and then just to frame it a little bit. So what they're talking about is the countywide planning policies as well as the population projections for Jefferson County. And ultimately, the Board of Commissioners for the county adopt the countywide planning policies and the population projections. What the board would like to do is have a growth management steering committee reconvene with 3 county all three county commissioners, three city council people, plus an appointed representative from the port and appointed representative from the PUD. Sounds like the port, if what they said was accurate, was sending a staff member, Eric Taves, who used to be working for the city back when the growth management planning policies were originally done. So he may have been very much involved with those to begin with. And then who do we want to appoint? The meetings will be public and open to the public, so anybody can show up. I think it could be appropriate if we feel like we want to have a staff member there and an elected person there. You know, both could show up. It's just a question of who's the official representative. So when they're listing who they are, they have them identified. So I think that's the question.
Well, we were all listening to the meeting. So again, scheduling is obviously going to be an issue. We saw it from the first, starting with the first meeting. So I like the idea of, you know, a commissioner being the lead and then maybe having staff, you know, for continuity going along and keeping up in case the commissioner couldn't be there. You heard my comments, and that is when you look at the composition of this board, this is comp plan update oriented for the county and for the city. So it makes sense for this three city, you know, council members to be on there. The county, obviously, that's county comp plan, so you have a representative from each district. The port has, you know, their person on there. My concern was that all the districts of the county are going to be equally represented. District 2 and District 3 seem a little light in this process. That's why I would be interested as the District 3 commissioner, and I have a lot of continuity with District 2 as well, to be that representative.
Okay.
And this goes back to growth management back in the mid-90s when this first transpired. The path that the county was set on, you know, some over 30 years ago. There's still a lot of, dissent is probably the actual word out in the community, that they're not represented in these types of things enough. So that's my, you know, motivation for wanting to be our representative, is for District 2 and District 3 to be at this table.
Yep. So there are times when we have more than one commissioner interested in a position. Like you, Dan, I'm also interested in this position for a little different reasons. I was a planner when the Growth Management Act first came out, and my job when I worked with Grant County as an intern was to help them get through that process. And they didn't have one city, they had 13. So I was involved in that. And it was interesting for me to hear too that the countywide planning policies actually have not been adjusted since first adopted. And the structure of them from the state of Washington was growth management was new, and they really didn't want us stepping on each other's toes. They didn't want counties stepping on cities' toes, trying to annex the same land, coming up with different plans for the same area. So it was really about having consistent plans. And I think in some ways, the countywide planning policies are, you hear about belt and suspenders, you know, two different ways to make sure your pants don't fall down. And that's kind of what they are from my perspective. It's making sure we're coordinated. So I'm interested in it too, from that standpoint. And I consider myself a commissioner for all three of our districts. I'm concerned about things in Brennan and Quilcene too. So I think this is going to go to you, Commissioner Collins, as to who you want to represent the PUD. And that's kind of what I see this position as. Who's the best person to represent us?
I certainly appreciate, Dan, what you have to say about District 2 and District 3 generally being underrepresented. At the same time, I would like to see, since this is likely to be ongoing, that the position go along with the president of the PUD board commissioners
Okay.
and be rotating as that position rotates every couple
Well, this
of
is
years.
only like a 1-year board. This isn't,
It
this
sounds like
isn't,
it's going to be like 4 meetings done by the
yeah,
end of
this,
the year.
it's not something that we would, a rotation would really be at issue.
Although it will come up again
Yeah.
years down
And,
the road.
and the
So-
argument could be made, most of this growth is going to happen in District 2 and in District 3.
Well, that's
The
not,
projected population and growth.
that's not what the countywide planning policies currently say. They say 70%, but that'll be one of the things that will be looked at. And a bigger question I had, I didn't ask it of staff because we were short on time, was how does it even matter? I mean, we pick a population projection, and from my numbers, it looked like we're going to be between medium and high based on our historic growth rates. When we say it's going to go to this part of the county, how does that matter? It's not like there's a gate that shuts down and it's so many building permits, they stop issuing building permits. I'm interested in how, you know, we have to do these numbers. What's the effect? Does it affect the money we get for affordable housing? What is, I don't know the answer to that. So that'll be interesting to find
Well, in
out.
the comp plan update, again, it's, the master shoreline program, county health and things like that, septic permitting and where you can build. And that a lot of those ordinances, I think, are going to get touched by this. And again, it will matter where, the perceived population growth or construction of, expansion of infrastructure, whatever the case may be, that it's probably likely to be, in my opinion, outside the city. So again, goes back to my point of representation for, again, I'm with you. I represent District 1 as well, but I think District 1 is very well represented with the group that's already showing. So again, this is a way, in my opinion, to do some outreach and say, we hear you in Districts 2 and District 3, because 30 years ago, the public made a lot of comments on this and it was ignored or, disregarded. So we don't want to repeat that, even though this is a way smaller version of what happened then. But like you said, there's not been much changed over the past 30 years in regards to this. So there could be some real impacts here. I don't know what they'll be. I'm with you. I think the population growth is going to be in that median to upper levels because it shot out there to 2045. And this is one more issue of what got us on this path to begin with in the county, was restricting growth caused a lot of the problems that we're now experiencing with housing, with sewer, wastewater, whatever it may be,
Yeah. So
building permits and whatever. So
there are some different circumstances now. They planned for the tri-area UGA to be a, limited area, more intense rural development. It's now going to have sewer. So I think there is going to be recognition of changes made. So I guess with all that being said, are we sticking with the comments we've made so far and moving ahead?
Well, since it's only gonna be for this year, I'm gonna go with having a greater representation outside of District 1. So you got it, Dan.
again, I look at this collaborative, I think that, I don't know if those will be closed. I don't think they'll be closed meetings. So I think we all have the
They're
ability.
not closed meetings.
Yeah.
They are
so
public
they're open public
meetings.
meetings. So again, I think it's a matter of, who can make the meetings. And again, seconds, as far as another commissioner being sitting in or staff sitting in, I think that's really the question for us is, who's the prime, who has first shot, first opportunity, and then we'll, come back from that as to whether it's another commissioner or staff. I don't think that committee is going to have an issue with that. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we need to
Don't
follow up.
believe there could be an alternate.
Yeah, I don't know. That's something I have no clue to that. So, but again, if it's an open meeting, there's nothing, keeping us
Right.
from listening in.
I don't see why there wouldn't be an alternate if somebody's not available. Well, I think that's up to us, how we designate that.
So that's kind of the question and be asked.
I'll ask, but like I said, I don't know. I shouldn't say.
Yeah. So I guess, what I'm hearing is Dan is the steering committee representative. I'd like to be the alternate. Any objections? Okay.
No.
And staff is welcome to attend. I probably will attend ones. And the only thing we can't do is discuss or decide PUD business.
Right.
Okay. Unless we advertise.
Yeah,
this as a
and
special
this
meeting.
might be determined by scheduling. I mean, we all have busy schedules, so
Right.
depending on how their polls work out
Right.
for when they're gonna do
And,
the
and
meeting.
you mentioned you were going to be in DC for March 5th. Is that right? But I looked at the
No,
schedule.
we'll be
and
back.
it's-
Yeah, we
Yeah.
get back on the 1st or the 2nd.
it's
We
o-
have a board meeting here on the 5th, so the
Right.
first meeting will be after our board meeting.
Right. So the first meeting of the steering committee will be here at 6 o'clock. So we need to try and keep the meeting so we can end it at, say, 5:45 or so. Okay. More discussion. Okay.
My schedule, Thursday and Friday, have a personal obligation I have to attend. And then the following week, Dan and I are in Washington DC. So I'm gonna shift some things around, still try to take some meetings, but it'll be hit and miss. Mike, quick update on Moss Adams?
Yeah. So we have a group, I just looking at it here, coming in the week of March 25th. To help with grant compliance. They're gonna meet with staff, help us make sure that we're in compliance with our grants. Tracking and everything set up, so that way down the road, 6-7 years down the road, we can still make sure we pass all of our audits. Document everything we need to make, so they're gonna come in the week of March 25th. If possible, we may try to set something up with the board so they can kind of meet with the board. If not, we may do one-on-ones. And invite the board to stop by and talk to the group that's coming in as well.
We would like to try to set up a meeting, but at the very least, the one-on-ones with Los Adams for the grants, the shared number, the stuff. It's important.
Yeah, so it looks like the 25th, 26th, 27th, somewhere in there.
So say that again, you're trying to set up meetings with commissioners
No, we'd
with-
like to set up a single meeting if
Okay.
possible.
that we would have as a public meeting?
Yes.
Okay,
We can't get a time scheduled with everybody, and I'll send out an email tomorrow.
okay, but you're saying March, what are the dates again?
It
25th,
would be like the
26th, 27th?
25th, 26th, 27th.
Okay,
Probably not the March, yes.
Yeah, we have a board meeting on the 25th, special meeting scheduled unless that's.
Yeah.
yeah.
But we could keep it if everyone's still good with that.
Well, that one was moved. I
I have it on 2:00.
Yeah, so
The
do I.
25th.
Hey,
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Keep up the good work. Winter's not over.
You
Thanks for
guys.
being here.
Stay safe out there.
They hate to come.
What's that?
They hate to come in here, but they did. Yeah.
So, yeah, so I'll send out an email tomorrow, see if we can set something up. If not, we'll just invite each commissioner to stop by and individually talk to the group and
The
get information.
25th is still on your calendar. We
Okay, I am confused.
Okay.
Do we need to meet together or are we meeting separately? What are we doing and why are we doing it?
So we want to meet as a group with them, just so they can kind of come in, explain their processes, what they're doing to help the PUD out.
Understood.
So that's, if we can set up a meeting, if we still have the one on the 25th, if that still works for everybody. We'll use that time if possible.
Okay,
If it doesn't work, then we can look at alternative ways to make it work.
okay. So I have it on my calendar for 2:00 on the 25th.
That's what I still have.
That was gonna be the broadband that we moved from. To the 5th.
Right.
I hadn't received anything telling me that yet. I don't believe.
Broadband.
So we're gonna
So-
scratch that special meeting?
Nope, we're gonna leave it.
We'll leave it and we'll use it for this one,
Oh.
which will be kind of in the same.
But actually, we'll be kind of broadband.
Yeah,
So it's broadband, I mean, do they just need like 15 minutes at the beginning to say, hi, we're your auditors, or is there more to it than that?
They'll probably want a little bit more than 15 minutes. They're not really auditing, it's grant compliance. It's a group that helps make sure that we're compliant with all of the grants and grant reporting processes, how we are tracking all the costs and everything.
Okay, so half hour at the beginning.
Probably a half
And then
hour, yeah.
I think we should still plan on a full 2 hours for broadband. So if commissioners are okay, staying for up to 3 hours.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I'm good that whole week. The only other thing I have is Thursday. I will be in Olympia for Waputa, the quarterly water committee meeting. So other than that, I'm good that whole week. So,
well, I think we're saying
yeah, on the 25th,
auditors first and then broadband, and broadband can have a full 2 hours.
if
Okay,
there's a hitch.
Remember, we moved broadband to 3:00 next week, so you're getting an hour. The March 5th meeting. You guys didn't want to wait for broadband.
that's true. I do recall that.
So you told us to bring part of it to you on the 5th. So
Okay,
Get an hour on the 5th. So I'm
Okay.
saying
so warm us up.
2 hours is probably with the auditors and everything, about an hour and a half for broadband.
Okay,
Probably be okay.
give us the warm up. It'll give us a chance to think about things, and then you got a whole,
Yeah, Doug Dawson will be here on the 5th.
The whole day if you want, just bring pizza.
Sure, do it all day.
Okay. And then on the 5th also will be the Growth Management Steering Committee at 6. So it'll be an interesting day.
One day.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
Mike, do you want to do tier real quick? or you wanna go
Yeah.
back next?
Take your best shot at saying what happened with tier.
So we did with the auditor from BSGM, our financial auditor that we're using. He did have me move $4.6 million from our contribution in Aid to Construction to a deferred account. Because it's the state money that we got for the Reconnect grant, that until we're ready to start that project, and start using those funds, we're not gonna recognize it as revenue.
So it'll be really shown as we draw it, it'll
Yeah.
show up as revenue
Yeah.
contribution and aided construction instead
so
of like
we will
one
have-
big chunk.
So that's really where the biggest chunk of it is, the auditor.
Okay,
They said, here, you need to make these adjusting entries to make all the books record properly for the financial audit.
okay, so that little blip was an error and it's gonna show in the future as it comes
And
in.
it was grant money that had to be shown as income, as I
Sometime.
recall, correct?
Yeah.
It's not loan money from RUS, it's the state.
Yeah, the exact description that they said was to defer grant proceeds until project and amortize as project is completed.
Perfect, makes sense.
So that is what the difference.
Okay.
So I guess the question is what further ripple effects down the road will it have on your rolling tier? All right, it's had this effect, obviously. Is there going to be another effect later as we?
If we bring it back on, yes, it will affect that year's tier because it will still be considered revenue at that time. So we reduced our tier now because we were basically overstating it because they said, you know, we're not using those proceeds now. Don't record them as revenue. It's future revenue. So as we bring that money back from the deferred account and record it as revenue, it will affect the rolling tier.
Right, so there will be ripples in the rolling tier moving forward through the rest of this year for sure, then it sounds like.
Well, and probably not in 24 anymore. Because we're not gonna start this project, the Reconnect project, probably until like 25, 26.
Oh, okay.
That's that's the last one, one of the last ones that we did. So this project's down the road, so. It's gonna be deferred for a couple of years. So that's
Okay.
part of the reason they said to go ahead and defer it.
Okay. I have a question for staff if you're done with your reports.
Thing is the update on some projects out of Hastings.
Go ahead. Yeah, do that.
The three-phase line extension, it's a conversion from single phase to three-phase out in front of the, or past the fairgrounds. We believe the crews will start setting poles there on Thursday. Few little engineering stuff that has to be completed, so if it's not Thursday, it'll be the following week. We're still waiting on a permit from the city. So that part of the project is moving along within our schedule and should be completed within our schedule unless we have, you know, a couple more storms, and that really does take away from these type of projects. The Hastings, Dana Roberts, some of the substation upgrades, we're exchanging a lot of information with engineering. We will have a meeting first part of April for conceptuals. So they're on schedule. Nothing, as far as the transformers concerned in Hastings or Dana Roberts will happen this year. The regulators are on track to be changed out this year, but we don't have the design complete yet or a timeline, other than we have to do it during the summer because it's our least load timeframe. And that's when a lot of this.
So you have to take it offline in order to replace those. Okay.
It is scheduled midsummer, but there's still a lot of work to get done to make sure we meet that deadline.
Okay. I can't remember if we've done like an article in the Leader or if there's a planned newsletter article just about the whole. I mean, we had the peak loads, we had some outages. It seems like that was covered a little bit. So now I think the follow-up story is, so what are we doing about it short term? What are we doing about it long term? And I think, that could be a nice article for Jameson because so many of people were affected by it and it's a big issue for us. You put those numbers up on the board of $100 million or whatever of needed improvements that we need to address to handle growth. So I don't know if that's something that we could talk about.
Jameson's looking at something, putting some of those numbers together just because it does tie into our rates and, moving forward.
Right.
Jameson talked to me today actually about maybe getting something in the next newsletter. I'm not sure of the time.
Okay. And then how do those numbers that you had up there, that big long list, how does that relate back to the 4-year capital improvement plan
So
that we have for the electrical division? What is that beeping? That's all right. Somebody likes you.
Um, so, we're working on the 4-year work plan now. What staff will do is make some recommendations. We'll sit here at a board meeting and we'll move some things around priority wise. Because based on dollars, you know, we can only do so much,
Mhm.
so that, so the dollars will affect our 4-year work plan, but it'll be a discussion between staff and the board on where to put things and how to prioritize.
And when are we gonna look at that again?
Well.
Is that more
we
like budget
were
time?
hoping It should have been done already. We're a couple months behind at least, so I'm hoping. Once we have the conceptuals done on the substation, they're looking at the system loading stuff right now. I think we've given them all the information. The earliest is probably early April.
Okay. So would we have that on our agenda then as
It'll be an agenda
an item?
There'll probably be a couple meetings where it's maybe a 45-minute discussion, one meeting, and then the next meeting and the
Okay.
type of discussion.
And again, please put it on the agenda as an item so people can see that it's on there. Please, if you're doing a presentation, include some photos about what stuff is. I think that helps us understand how the system works and what these different pieces of equipment are. And then when it comes time, I'm presuming, I don't know if it's going to be budget time or when we're going to look at like the 4-year work plan as a kind of an adopted plan. I think it'll be worth having a conversation between the board and you about and I can hear you saying, we only got so much money, so we got to prioritize. But then to some extent, the board's involved with how much money you get to solve a problem. So I think talking about what those risks are, you know, with things that aren't on the list or they're on the list, but they're further down, then we talk about what the implications of that is, because we might say, we think this is a higher priority. We're willing to take on some additional financing or something to make that happen sooner. So I think that's a discussion we should have at the board level.
Part of the discussion will be financing.
Mm-hmm.
Is some of these probably should be financed.
Mm-hmm.
Mike and I have met and we're, it is honestly a big part of the discussion.
Yep. And then also, I think when we get there, maybe a little timeline of where, you know, the PUD is held, you know, like one line showing here's our principal that we owe, here's, you know, our value, our net value, those kind of indicators that they had us look at with RUS in terms of what's your health. I think giving us some feedback on that would be helpful at that same time.
Okay.
Anybody else, any other thoughts?
One more offshoot on the information side of things. At the last meeting, we discussed, you know, the granular look and dive into our outage information and how we're going to possibly present that, some level of that to the public. Is there any follow-up? Because I know I had a couple people ask me about that before the last meeting and we were going to, you know, get back to them. So I would like to know if we're any moving steps towards making that happen, or where are we at?
So I think we asked for about a month to get the information back to the board. I have not checked with David today, but a lot of the stuff he's already cleaned it up, gone through it, made sure the outage codes are correct. We are making some changes to our call out system so they get triggered better for next year. I still think we're on step to be done end of this month, and we'll have a report. We'll put it on the website. I have to have it by March 31st.
The dashboards are out there.
They're not correct.
They were just updated
When
within the last week or two.
from David's numbers,
Must Adams had to read some stuff.
yeah, we're talking two different things.
Okay.
You're pulling the raw numbers. We're having to fix
Okay.
the raw numbers.
I can share it if you want to.
And I haven't had anybody reach out to me for follow-up, but I'm just kind of preemptively, you know, if I get that question, give a progress report.
Yeah,
So
we're working on it. Those I don't think are up to date.
Okay.
More to come on outages.
Yep,
Okay.
work in progress.
So the last question I had relates, Gene will remember this one, that Mr. Knowles water meter. And I just reread your email that went out February 13th that described the situation. And my understanding again is he's saying he's got 27 pounds of pressure at his house. Minimum of 30 is kind of recommended. And I looked up and it said something like 30 to 60 is kind of a better range. And he has a long service between his meter and his house. I don't know how many feet that is.
It's a long ways according to Eric.
A long ways.
30 at
At the meter, he's got 30, but by the time he gets to his house, he's got 27.
So I'm gonna jump in here.
I'm like, where are we with him? Because that's what I want to know. Does he know where he stands and what? And I saw that there is a booster pump as an option that he could install at his house. Going back to a 1-inch meter is an option we could do. And
Inch meter is not an option. The size of the meter and just to throw this out there. I know electrical and I know a little bit about pumps, but on this case, we went to HDR, our engineer, and the size of the meter does not affect the pressure.
so they're able to map it out and say, we got this size of pipe going this far.
Pressure's based on our tank site and the pressure coming down. So to go from a 5-inch or a
5/8
inch to a 1-inch meter does not increase his pressure.
Okay, so we've modeled it. We don't think that's going to be a solution. So what is our formal communication to him then?
We were gonna send him an email saying, okay, this is our response from HDR. The size of the meter does not affect your pressure at your house. The rest, Gene has already, the credit was done.
We've done a credit, but I think he needs to know who's we're saying we've modeled this. We don't think that 1-inch solution is the solution. We think solution is booster pump. If you want to have higher pressure in your house, it seems like installing a booster pump, this is something other customers have had to do in a similar situation. If you want to have better pressures, that's our recommendation. Okay, so in addition to an email, could we make that a formal letter too that he gets in the mail that's signed by us? So he knows that we're kind of closed on it for now and he knows where he stands. Okay. Thanks. That one just kind of kept going around like a ping pong ball.
Yeah, it'd be nice to put
Many,
a
many
final
meetings.
signature on things to say the board has kind of weighed it all and
Yeah,
we're
we
going
don't-
with
you don't even-
policy and
Don't even
staff's
have
gonna
to
deal with
mention
it.
us. I mean, I feel like we've been briefed. So, yeah, but I think it needs to be real specific. We've modeled this. Our engineers, this is our answer. Okay. And nothing else on staff? All right, then we are off to commissioner reports. Commissioner Tupper, would you like to go first?
Sure, thank you. So I attended the PPC Members Forum on February 7th. PPC staff gave a presentation showing the power demands on BPA during the January cold spell and how that led to BPA being a net importer, which was out of the ordinary. They also, and possibly a trend, we'll have to see how things work going forward. They also shared some comparisons between main stem dams on the Columbia and the ability of those dams to ramp up generation and their ability to produce a bulk of the CRSO, Columbia River System operations output. I attended the PPC Executive Committee meeting on February 8th. Some of the discussions revolved around PPC members were advocating that BPA continue to fund and move forward with the development of Southwest Power Pool's Market Plus day-ahead market. Or is that extended day ahead? I don't remember now. Yeah.
Extended day ahead market, I think is
Yeah.
kind of the generic.
Also concerns with the progress on the Columbia River Treaty not progressing and PPC's position that the Army Corps of Engineers do not have a flood management plan to institute if and when the current agreement ends later this year. So there's some concern there about if Canada starts releasing water, how's that, or not releasing water, as the case may be, is how's that going to affect flood planning? There was a robust discussion about the potential implications and impacts that the recent Six Sovereigns Agreement will have on Northwest ratepayers, as well as a PPC filing with the Federal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on the legalities of BPA being involved with that agreement and the commitments that are outlined within the agreement for BPA to comply with. So that's going to be an interesting court decision if and when they get that thing moving. BPA Administrator Harrison gave a report on BPA in general, but did not elaborate or answer anything pertaining to that Six Sovereigns Agreement. I attended the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee, PNUC, of which were introduced as its newest member. John DeStasio, president of the Large Public Power Council, spoke about resource adequacy challenges as everyone in the region tries to transition to more electrification. He said that maintaining grid stability and reliance will depend on retaining natural gas generation. Now, how much of that remains to be seen, but he did say that, from their standpoint, that they don't see how this can happen without natural gas. That was my takeaway. Arnie Olson, senior partner at E3, which is the Energy Environmental Economics Consulting Group, talked about renewable energy credits, the pros and cons. His comments left me kind of with the impression, because he focused on solar, I think in particular, that solar is being overbuilt in many instances, and this is on an industrial scale. I'm not talking about necessarily net metering or small instances of it. They can have a detrimental effect. The overbuilding could have an effect on current and future carbon credits that actually damage carbon reduction efforts in some instances. So again, that's kind of Joy's thing. Maybe you or Joy would like to elaborate that on when you get to your part of your commissioner's report. So that, to me, it was somewhat confusing, but I kind of think I had the gist of it. So if I'm wrong, maybe you can set me straight. I met with Kevin Street on February 12th. I attended our BOC special meeting on the financial report, closing out the year 2023. I attended the Waputa Day on the Hill events at the Capitol Building on February 14th. Waputa members had a very successful day of networking with legislators about legislation and issues that are going to affect public utility customers. I attended the Waputa Commissioner Education Committee meeting later that day. It was a presentation by Ernie Klimek of Evergreen Rural Water of Washington. I gave our general manager some information that came out of that. And what they do is they train and help place apprentices as water and wastewater operators. So that's something that is in our future one way or another, I'm pretty sure. So there was also a member roundtable discussion about succession planning. And also the water group, Evergreen Rural Water, they also have some training and classes on cybersecurity for water operators as well that they're working on. So again, cybersecurity, we don't talk about it much. But it's really going to be an important component of everything we do, on whether it's water, broadband, or electrical. I attended the Waputa committee meetings on February 15th. At the water committee meeting, Bowen Kendrick from Clallam PUD was elected to represent Waputa at the American Waterworks Association annual fly-in. Waputa staff and our lobbyist Bill Clark gave updates on water funding opportunities. I know Jose was on the call, Kevin was on the call, so I hope staff was able to glean something out of that maybe we've missed, or maybe something that we're working on. Also, they talked about potential state legislation that could establish a new mandated low-income water assistance program. Now, I don't know if that's dead yet or not, or what's going on. I haven't followed with what's going on with the budgets coming out of the state right now. So I think that was somewhat reliant on what happened with the budgets. The PUD Public Works Board member report from Okanagan, I don't remember his name, reported that Public Works Board is still searching for a new executive director. I attended the Jefferson County ICG meeting later that day. On February 16th, I attended the Waputa Board of Directors meeting. I attended the I will attend the Waputa APPA fly-in. No, it was the briefing. Actually, I did attend the briefing on February, I forget what the date, 19th, I believe it was. So I will meet with Kevin Street on February 21st, and I will be attending the APPA annual legislative rally in Washington, D.C. with our general manager on February 26th through March 1st. I will attend the Jefferson County home show on March 2nd, and I will attend the Jefferson County Fire Chiefs meeting on March 9th.
Commissioner Collins.
That's the short version.
So
Busy 2 weeks.
on February 8th, I listened in on the legislative update from Waputa. Had a meeting with the general manager the following day, the 9th. Attended the Waputa meeting on the 14th. And I was also impressed with the Evergreen training program. And that's definitely, I'm glad that you forwarded that information to Kevin, because I think that's something we need to keep our eye on. I think it sounded like a very thorough program, and who knows when the need may arise. So I attended the Waputa meeting on the 15th, and particularly the telecom meeting where they reviewed the 2025 strategic plan. They did a little bit of tweaking to the language, nothing particularly significant. But then they approved it. Met with the general manager the morning of the 16th and attended the Waputa board meeting that followed. I will be meeting, I think, with the general manager, maybe on the 23rd. Following week, it looks like I'll be meeting with the committee of folks from Beckett Point who will want to be talking about the cost of the on-site septic system. It looks like they finally got their report from the consultants that they hired, and so they wanted to bounce some things off of me first, and I'll make myself available hopefully on the 27th. Then I'll meet with the general manager on the 1st, and I'd like to make it over to the home show at least for a bit of time on the 2nd.
So on Beckett Point, do we as a board need to make a decision on rates or something here after you're done collecting information? What's the end game of the process that you're in with Beckett Point right
Yeah.
now? Because we have the rate case, the rate study coming. So do we have to get to a certain point with Beckett Point to help
So-
FCS?
The way the process is unfolding, we already decided and they accepted provisionally the rates that we set. Now, they hired a consultant because they wanted to do benchmarking as to whether the amount of service that we were providing them and charging them for really was in line with or excessive compared to what other comparable systems are doing. So the end result will be, they may decide that to the extent that they can under state regs, have some of that work done privately. They may, I'm sure they'll want to come back and talk with general manager, maybe with the board of commissioners, as to what they might like to try to negotiate with us. But I think it's a matter of what does the state require with an on-site septic system, and is there any opportunity to customize the operations for them at a rate that they're more comfortable with.
So now that they have their consultant give them this information, you have somewhat of an idea of the timeline you think of the process when this will come to a close, if there's a such thing as a close to this process?
So the anticipated time of completion for the report was October. So if that's any indication, I think that this process will probably extend well into mid-year.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that your report?
That's my report.
Okay. So I also was at the PPC meetings, February 7th and 8th. And one of the big things for me was we just found out in January about this mediated settlement agreement between the federal government and a number of the tribes that BPA signed on to. And then we found out at this PPC meeting in February that PPC has filed litigation challenging that mediated settlement, and that invoices were sent out to all the PPC members, and ours was somewhere in the range of $1,000 to $2,000 or something like that. That's what it listed on their paperwork.
I thought I heard 2,300.
Yeah,
Thought I
like
heard-
22, 23.
So it sounds like it doubled versus what was listed in the documents provided. So I'm just gonna say, and so then I went and I read, what I found, was filed December 23rd by PPC, challenging that. And it was written by the Eileen Scruggs before she left, PPC. And I think there is significant, potential for additional legal expenses. I think that was supposed to fund $250,000 in legal expenses. If they doubled it, maybe it's 500,000 because that's what their paperwork originally said. And I understand we've paid that. We've paid the invoice sent to us. I would like to request that if we get future invoices about this litigation, that we discuss it, because as I read the challenge to it, it was really awkward being in that meeting and had the head of BPA show up, and the head of BPA can't talk about it because he's being sued by the organization that we're a part of. So we got to the settlement agreement and John Harrison just said, I can't talk about this because you're suing us. And I was not happy with that. And I think a lot of our constituents would be upset to see if they read that mediated settlement and what it agrees to, and that we're paying for a lawsuit against them. As I read what Eileen filed,
It's Irene.
Irene, that's what I meant to say. I caught myself. Irene filed. It's very convoluted and complicated. And I actually called the Seattle representative after that meeting to find out, because Seattle's, it said 18,000. If they doubled it, 30,000 that they're paying in support of it, how they felt about it. And she looked at it as, oh, it's really just challenging the process. But as I read the litigation document, it was much more than that. So anyway, just in the future, if we get invoices, I'd like a chance for us to discuss it before we pay it. Let's see, there was a lot of conversations about the whole peak load event. So, I mean, it affected the whole state, the whole region. It affected other places differently than it affected us, but it was a record event. So
Record income for California and CAISO.
yeah, I'm going to get to that. So at the PNUC meeting, which I think Joy was there, I was there. It was really interesting. For me, the interesting part was when they talked about how transmission worked during that peak loading event, and that we have a straight transmission line to the Southwest and it was maxed out. And the Southwest had more energy they could send us, but they couldn't send it over that line. So they routed it through California. And because they routed it through California, California made $100 million in 5 days. And there was a discussion that if they had instead spent that $100 million, that would cover 7% of the cost of upgrading the transmission lines between us and the Southwest. So we could better send power back and forth, because according to the people at the PNUC meeting, we line up pretty good with the Southwest, that their peaks are in the summer. They're summer peaking, we're winter peaking. They've got excess renewable energy in the winter that they can share with us. And we generally have hydro we can share with them. So that was an interesting discussion, but it sounds like that is proceeding, that BPA and others are working with the transmission plan to make upgrades and figure out how to allocate those costs.
Yeah, again, it's transmission congestion. Again, maybe Joy wants to weigh in at some point on this. If this was part of what she did at Tacoma, maybe give us some insight. I don't know. But yeah, again, the bigger picture is siting matters, and transmission is a big component of how things are going to move forward in the future. I hear what you're saying about the Southwest aligning with us, maybe. Again, I'm not so sure that I'm as confident that we align that well.
So then on that E3 study you referred to, it was very strange to me listening to that whole thing. And he was criticizing renewable energy credits, but then at the end he said, don't replace them, we need them. And he basically said there's this talk about going to an hourly market on renewable energy credits. And his opinion was that's too hard to do. It's not going to work. And the statement I wrote down is, he said, to make a realistic impact, each utility must buy a real green energy project that can make power to replace fossil fuels on their grid at the actual time it's generating. And so it was just kind of a very nano look at renewable energy credits that to me I wasn't that interested in it, frankly. And at the end, he's like, don't replace it. I'm criticizing it, but don't replace it because there's nothing better. But
So, Commissioner, speaking of E3, at a past meeting,
Mm-hmm.
I had made a suggestion that you prepare some sort of analysis, which is a rebuttal to the E3 report.
Right.
So just a reminder.
Yeah, no, and actually and I'll get to that, that was discussed at the Energy Committee meeting. So anyway, that's that. So then we had our financial meeting update on the 13th. On the 14th, I attended the NOAANET meeting in the morning. The process is that the bylaws are going to come to the March meeting, which is going to be in Olympia, and I'm planning to go to that in person. There were no objections by the members for the bylaw changes, and they couldn't approve the bylaws because Energy Northwest is currently still a member. They need to switch to be an affiliate member before the vote because the bylaws currently require 100% approval to change them. So that's that process. At the Waputa meeting, there was discussion about all these initiatives that are in front of the legislature that apparently two of the big ones, the capital gains tax and the Climate Commitment Act, they're not going to have hearings on them. The legislature is not going to adopt an alternative. They're not going to address the initiatives. They're going to wait for them to go to the ballot. And then if it's repealed, all the money that's built up in the carbon offset account, which is like $1 billion or more, would roll into the general fund. And then the state would have the option to continue spending that money on carbon reduction, or they could spend it on anything else. So that was a really interesting conversation. Scott Corwin was there. He's now with APPA. He talked a little bit about that permitting reform for things like transmission for new energy projects. There is discussion about permitting reform at Congress. However, different groups are looking at it differently. So getting actual permitting reform, in his opinion, was not likely to happen because people want to do different things with it. He said that settlement agreement, there's not broad awareness of it in Congress yet, even though it's being widely discussed in the West. Then we had Jake Fye, Representative Jake Fye was there for the Energy Committee, talked about different energy stuff and transmission stuff or transportation things. And we had some good Q&A with him. The issue of that E3 study came up again because now apparently there's an effort to fund another study for another $500,000 of net metering, but to ask a different question. So apparently they're looking at it that the state would fund it. And I've heard that PSE is interested in it because they're approaching the max, and the solar energy industry in the state is looking at participating in it in a different way. And it sounds like it's going to ask different questions. Instead of, is there a cost shift? It's going to ask the question of what's the value of
Yeah.
it? And I think that's more relevant, frankly. So I appreciate you goosing me. I was going to call the executive director of Waputa because at the end she said, net metering is not working very well for us. And I'd like to ask her, what does she mean by that? Because I'm still unaware of anybody having to do any improvements to allow for net metering. And I look at it as energy conservation. So there's definitely people in Waputa who've got her ear about it. And I'm curious to know more about that. The ICG meeting, we talked about the growth management process. We've kind of covered that. It was interesting to hear this money that we're collectively going after on the Olympic Peninsula, it's Economic Development Authority funding, $50 million pot of money. There's only a few we were one out of 22 invited to participate in phase 2, and that the port has a $9 million project that they've got in that. I thought that was really interesting and pretty cool that our region had competed that well compared to all the ones around the country. I'll meet with the PUD manager tomorrow on the phone if we're on for that. Energy Northwest has an outside director committee meeting, which is reviewing Tim Sheldon's position on the Energy Northwest Executive Board and some other applicants. That's going to happen Thursday. I'll plan to be at the home show for a little bit on the 2nd. NOAANET meeting on the 13th. And then I was going to ask, do you guys know if you're going to go to that Waputa annual meeting in Skamania?
Yeah, I'm
or not?
going.
You're going to go? You're gonna go
I'm
too?
planning on.
I haven't decided yet. Just curious about that. And I think that is the end of my report. Yep.
So just going back to the Seattle City Light that you talked to,
Yeah.
representing from, Again, they're obviously members of PPC. I think they had it right. I think the real question about what are the real implications to BPA to be involved with this?
Mhm.
You know, is it go beyond their statutory authority to do the things that they're being tasked to do, i.e. the money that's going to be spent? So
That's one of the questions.
yeah, I think that they kind of gave it to you in the right context.
Well,
Of why
they-
why PPC is doing what
The
they're doing.
lawsuit says a lot more than that, though. The lawsuit encourages the court to throw out the stay of litigation. It says that the stay shouldn't be allowed, and these lawsuits that are now 20 years old should just all be thrown out. It's kind of a shotgun approach attacking everything. And it didn't really it doesn't really address, is there any value in the settlement? And to me, it's unfortunate that we didn't get to hear from BPA of, is there value? What do we gain by this? So it's just
Well, I think the
unfortunate.
administrator and BPA are between a rock and a hard spot. So there's the politics side of things, and then there's the reality and statute side of things. And so, I think that this, we'll call it a lawsuit. I don't know if that's the proper
It
term
is.
or not to
It is.
use, but I think it is warranted at this point. You're right. We should discuss it as a board as things move forward. If there is more cost to litigate through PPC in particular, we belong to a lot of different organizations, whether it's Energy Northwest that we're giving money to, we should have those discussions.
Yep. And again, the bottom line was BPA and the settlement agreement has said there's $300 million of additional cost to us over 10 years. And the lawsuit says, no, there's more like 2 billion in costs. So it's like, what's the truth? We don't get to hear that. All right, moving ahead. Consent agenda. We have a number of items on the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to accept, or do we need to take anything off?
I'll make the motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second,
Okay, motion to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Consent agenda is approved. Old business, new accounts payable policy. Is that you, Mike?
Yes, that will be me. I'm just getting where I can share the screen. So this goes back in December, at the December meeting, we had Moss Adams come in and present on a few policies. We contracted with Moss Adams to update a few policies, write a few new policies. This is one of the new policies that we have had them write out. Basically, it's defining more what we do with our accounts payable that we do now. It's the policies, the procedures, everything that we follow. We just don't have it in writing. So if something ever should happen, that kind of lets somebody else step into that spot and know what's going on. So I did. I've taken from the board some of the key changes and observations. I took out of Moss Adams' presentation. It's just going to require the vendor listing. The vendor listing will now be required to be reviewed annually to verify that we inactivate vendors and remove them, so that way we're only paying those that are active and are authorized to be doing. We're going to develop, a return and refund policy and procedures that will align with all the procurement policies and procedures. Talking about how AP will be responsible for determining if vendors are subject to the 1099 reporting requirements, and then submit those 1099s as appropriate. Just our closeout procedures to include, making sure that we're reviewing everything that comes up throughout the year, especially at the year end, that we're accounting for the cost in the correct year. Accruing expenses that we need to accrue for the prior year that we may not pay until the following year, but just to match up our expenses with our revenues. That's really all this policy is. So we're just looking for a motion from the board to go ahead and approve this policy and procedures to get it in place. Like I said, it's a brand new policy. We don't have one in place right now. So.
Okay, and just for clarification, is this the first time we've seen this?
So it was presented partially to you in December.
Okay.
Moss Adams did go over it. They didn't go over page by page. I did share it.
Okay. I think that
December,
can count as a first touch, but given that, do we have any questions from the board on this policy change?
Just on page 3, or actually it's page 55 of the packet. Under budget, it's item 5 of the document, budget management policies. Just curious if staff was comfortable with the timelines you had set up there. I mean, it's pretty tight There's some dates with the end of August versus the beginning of September or specific dates. Are you allowing yourselves enough time to get everything done?
So those actually are ones that we already have to follow. We do have to, by the RCW on our budgets, we do have to have it posted on our website the first Monday of September, because we do have the budget hearing the first Monday of October. We have to do it 30 days in advance. So that's everything that is, all the dates and stuff that are listed there are dates that we follow now. And so there's nothing hard. It's just, we have to have it, it's kind of how we do it now. We talk to you guys by August, finalize everything by the end of August. So by that first Monday, which is usually ends up being Labor Day, we have to have it posted that Monday and then have our budget hearing on the first Monday of October. So.
Yeah, I realize that most of that or all of it was the way we've been doing it. My question really was, is staff still comfortable with those timelines and that process, or do we think we should?
We want it in writing.
Okay,
We need to have stuff like this.
Okay.
It holds our feet.
It's not, people aren't having to remember what the standard is. It's in the policy. Okay.
yeah, I have no objections. I just making sure that staff has thought it all through and looked at all the dates and decided that that's going to allow you enough time to meet these things that are going to be in the policy.
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
So I'll move that the Board of Commissioners approve the new Jefferson County PUD accounts payable policies and procedures.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have, before we go to a vote, do we have any public comments or questions on this? Not seeing any. All in favor of the new accounts payable policy, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The policy is approved. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Item 8.2, new budget management policy.
So again, this is what I would consider a second touch. It was presented to the board by Monsanto's back in December. Here again, it's one of those things, just putting things in writing that we don't have in writing. It's kind of the budget process that we follow now. They did do, interview Kevin and I, followed what we did. So this is just another one of those things where they're putting it in writing, following the dates and everything. So it's easily, the board, staff all know, the public will know what's going on. So excerpt from their thing about the key changes and observations. Budget amendments greater than 10% of the original budgeted amount will now require the board's approval. Prior to this, we didn't have any amendments. That's one of the biggest changes. And it just ensures that we follow the budget hearing for the public criteria is compliant with all applicable RCWs. So here again, we're just looking for a motion to go ahead and approve the budget management policy. Again, and just putting everything in writing that we do now.
Okay, anybody have any questions?
No, and I was ahead. I looked at two things kind of together, so I didn't
Okay.
realize we were doing separate.
I had one question on this. I didn't see anything in there talking about kind of the quarterly updates we do. Is that true that there's nothing in there?
So that's more of the financial policy. The
Okay.
budget this one was more just how we create our overall budget.
Okay.
The financial policy does talk about us giving the quarterly.
Oh, it does?
I
Okay.
believe it does, yes.
Okay.
Don't quote me on it, but I
All right.
believe
Well, if we ever touch it again, we should check. But again,
we have it written down somewhere.
I think we do, but I don't think it's in that policy.
I think we have it somewhere, but if not, we'll double check it. And we'll
Okay.
update one policy that says that we have to do quarterly updates.
okay. And this is budget management,
Yeah.
not budget creation. Okay. All right.
So I will move that the Board of Commissioners approve the new budget management policies and procedures.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Motion a second. Again, any questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Aye. The motion for a new management policy, budget management policy is adopted. New business, senior low income program. Is that Jean?
Is me. So this is the first time you're seeing it this year, and I'm happy to bring it back next meeting, of course.
Okay.
The standard low income program is tied to the federal poverty guidelines. The senior program lacks I'm sorry, it's late.
Metric, metric like that.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It does not have an automatic update, so it requires us to come back every year to adjust the income level. So the dollar amount you approved last year was an 8.7% increase that matched the Social Security increase last year. And this year, that same dollar amount has now dipped down to 217% of poverty level from 224, just because it does not account for inflation. So recommendation would be to increase the senior qualification level to 33,947, which reflects a 4.1% increase over 2023 and is equal to the same increase given to the standard low-income folks in the federal poverty guidelines.
Okay, and that was something I wasn't clear on. So with it being at 33,947, does that get us up to the closer to the 225?
That takes
Percent?
us right to 225.
Okay, I got lost in the math, so thank you
It's not a
for,
math.
thank you
It's
for
not a math.
clarifying that. The bus didn't arrive at the station at the time I thought it was supposed to. Okay. Questions for Gene?
So this is an equation we're going to use now moving forward, or is this again a one-time type of a?
Well, my thought would be, we do need to change the whole program overall, and we are gonna be looking at that over this year. But rather than guessing every year as to how much we should raise it up, I would like to do it equal to the federal poverty guidelines. And I would bring it back to the board each time, just because the policy does need updating at that point. Because it is called out in the language in section 10.6.2 of the customer service policy. Mike, can you pull that up? It's 59, it's the page number.
Because the only question I have, if we go to a kind of a prescribed calculation for this, is if it could work in reverse, that depending on the consumer price index or inflation or whatever we're looking at, that we could end up having to drop this thing in a, not in a favorable to our low income
Right,
people.
and that is managed at the federal level as well. The way they handle that is if the CPI does drop, that's the poverty guideline stays at what it was originally set.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. That was my only concern, was that we'd have to go through this every year, especially if it went the opposite direction, to make sure that we're not forcing people off the program that need the program. So.
Right,
So it
right.
doesn't have a reverse gear. So as you pointed out right now, 10.6.2 senior low income rate reduction program doesn't have a formula.
It does not.
It's just got a number.
So I have Drew asking me, Gene, what are we doing? Gene, what are we doing?
So this would fix it for this year, it would increase it immediately. And I guess, yeah, if
It sets the metric for next year.
okay.
It's it's what we're asking for.
Okay, so you're not asking to update it with a formula that
Every
then,
year, no, we would use the same metric, the same benchmark.
so you'll just come back to us sooner,
But we'll come
preferably.
back to you sooner in the year.
So maybe even like during the budget process or something, so we could just,
Well, I won't know until the end of January.
Okay.
what the new FPG is. That comes
Okay.
out usually. It's around the 20th of January that is.
then do people have to apply for this then? Because if they're in the program, they're in the program, but if they're not in the program and now they might qualify,
We have two people who could, right now, who could qualify.
we kind of almost have like a wait list or something, or we know where they're at.
Keeps track of them when they're real close.
Okay,
Because he doesn't want to say no, but he has
Okay.
to. So he keeps track of them, and every time there's a change, he goes
Okay.
back to them.
good. All right. So this is a first touch. Frankly, I wouldn't have a problem moving this ahead because it affects people's pocketbooks, as opposed to waiting another meeting. So I don't know what the commission would like to do.
I don't have a problem with acting on it tonight.
Unless staff has an issue with it, I don't have any problem.
We've got a resolution in front of
Great.
us. Okay, there's a resolution. Well, first up, do we have any discussion on this item or questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
So I move that the board adopt a resolution revising the senior low income rate reduction program for it is getting late.
What shall
Well,
I
here,
read it?
maybe I'll take a crack at it.
Go ahead, Dan.
Recommendation that we accept the resolution increasing the household income limit for the senior low income program at 33,947 per year, which reflects a 4.1% increase over 2023, and that the customer service policies of the PUD are amended as reflected in the attached Exhibit A of this resolution.
I think that adequately describes the resolution. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The resolution's approved. Thank you, Gene.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And thank you, Drew, for implementing it and getting back to folks. Okay, we had one more item, 9.2, general manager. Apparently your salary has not been adjusted for a while.
So, my salary is set by the board independent of all of staff.
And the normal budget process and everything else. Okay.
So every year we have this discussion on my salary. This year I'm requesting 6.5% increase to my wage and 1 day annually added to my PTO bank.
PTO bank. Okay. Questions?
What was the increase last year?
4, I think, 4.5.
And one new position we have now is the assistant general manager. And is the assistant general manager currently making more than the general manager under the current salary?
Under the current salary, but that is somewhat normal. We try to do the staff's wage the very first of February, and then we try to get my wage in the second week.
Okay, so it's normal that you lag behind and then we get you increased later. Okay, and you're not asking for a retroactive, you're just asking to make it effective upon approval. Okay. Joel, do you have any issues with this or any clarifications on the board's role of setting the general manager's salary?
The board has really one employee that reports to it, and that's the general manager by statute. And you're required to enter into a contract with him, which you have, or you don't. No, you're not required to enter into a contract, but you are
We don't have a
required.
contract. We can fire him any day we want to.
Any
And he,
day. Well, you could do that anyway. You know that. But it's your job to set his salary and benefits.
okay.
Yeah, so this is in line with equalizing the general manager's pay with the rest of the organization. It's an equity issue, I think, at the end of the day. So we know how hard everybody works, and we know that what the general manager's doing and what, how much time he's putting in. So.
Well, and I really appreciate everything you do for us, Kevin. And you haven't been one who's out there demanding a contract and demanding a year's salary. If we let you go, you just basically, you show up, you do the work, and it is appropriate that you are the top paid employee for the organization, because ultimately you're responsible for the organization's performance, and you do a lot to help us keep our budgets in a positive manner. And you're doing a great job, and I just want you to, personally, to keep doing things so that you can hand things off, so this lovely lady sitting next to you is getting familiar with everything you do and have to do to keep this organization running and help us take the next steps to becoming the more professional, organization that we always strive to be, and ready for the challenges that are ahead of us. So I'm ready to support this request.
So I move that the board approve an increase of 6.5% for the general manager's salary, and also include an additional 1 PTO day.
I'll second the motion.
And again, it would become effective tonight. Clarification. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any questions, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion's approved. Thank you, Kevin.
And just to
And-
clarify, your increase won't come out of Joy's salary.
No, it will not.
All right, so we are adjourned, and there's this interest, Public Utility District Number 1 of Jefferson County is an equal opportunity provider and employer. It says at the bottom of the agenda.